What you are about to experience is out of this world. Politics, history, and of course, a lot of entertainment. It's time to rock it with the Docket.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Kyle Dockery with the Dockery Docket. We are here with our 105th episode of the Dockery Docket. I'm excited to be here, and I hope that you are excited to be here as well. And if you are excited to be here as well, make sure to go down below, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, so then you never miss one of my videos. So if there are two things in this world that Joe Biden loves to do more than anything, it's mumble through speeches and spend a lot of money. We aren't talking millions here, folks. We are talking about billions and billions of dollars. All of this money is trying to go to causes that are supposed to help the American people. All this money is supposed to create equity and inclusion in our country. But really what it's creating is rising inflation when inflation is already skyrocketing. It has put us in a recession as we are now in 3/4 of GDP decline, so the Democrats cannot get away with that anymore. And the thing is that we all should have seen this coming when Joe Biden came in and signed the American Rescue Plan, which really kicked off this spending spree and started all this snowball of inflation. You would think that after all of these different programs going on, there would be warning bells telling the president and the leader of the federal government that we need to slow down our spending. Maybe, just maybe, we need to start getting this economy back on track. But no, Joe Biden is out there just spending and giving away money like it's no big deal. The man is truly addicted to spending money, and we will run out of money if we don't take his checkbook away. Now, there are two different bills we will talk about today in this episode. For each of these bills, Joe Biden is trying to fix a problem. The first problem that he is trying to fix is the student loan debt crisis. Now, I am willing to admit that there is a serious problem when it comes to college debt. It has been plaguing a generation of students. It should be addressed. However, Joe Biden's solution to the problem is to throw money at it. As according to Joe Biden's Twitter, $20,000 in college debt will be forgiven if you received a Pell Grant, which is for lower income students. And then for people that didn't get a Pell Grant, they will receive $10,000 of debt forgiveness. This debt forgiveness only applies to those earning less than $125,000, and the student loan moratorium will officially end on December 31st, 2022, which is funny because it started during the pandemic back in 2020, and all of this is based on the income of the borrower. Now, the thing about this loan forgiveness is that it's a double-edged sword. Half of me is like, well, thanks, Joe, you're gonna help me a lot here. But then the other half of me is like, what are the ramifications of this bill? Because if Joe Biden forgives all of these different debts without addressing the main problem, this problem will just continue to happen to the next generation. And then they would need to have their debts forgiven. And then the next generation will need to have their debts forgiven. And then the cycle just continues over and over and over again. Along with this, if Joe Biden or the federal government continues to pay off these different debts, then colleges could actually continue to get more expensive. Because right now we are subsidizing students to go to college, meaning that we are paying students money to go to university. So colleges don't feel bad raising prices because the students will just take out a loan, or they will get a Pell Grant. Which I want to make sure I make clear that I am not against Pell Grants at all. I think they help students pay for college. But if students continue to get money from the government or take out different loans, colleges will continue to raise prices. So then they can get more money. It's almost like a scheme to get more money, and this scheme will continue to happen with Biden's new policy to pay off different debts. Because once again, colleges won't feel bad for raising the cost of college because the government will just pay for it anyway. Because we've all seen that college is getting more expensive over the years. And the question is, how can we make college less expensive so then people can go to college, maybe even take out a small loan and actually pay off that loan? Well, I think that we need to tell students that there are other options besides going to college. These different options are cheaper and can give students a very good job. For example, there are community colleges that cost a lot less. maybe go there for 2 years and then transfer to a university. So instead of paying 4 years at a university, you are only paying for 2 years. I know many friends who have done this. Along with that, there are different trade schools that on average cost $33,000, while the average of college degrees costs $132,000. Along with that, trade schools can get you a very good job that can pay for the schooling that you are going to. Or you could decide that you don't want to go to college at all, and you could still get a reasonable job to make money. And then if you make enough money and you decide that you wanted to go to college later because you have money to pay it off, then that's a good thing. My point is there are so many different options these days that there are ways that people can avoid getting into this debt. Here's another problem when it comes to Joe Biden trying to forgive these student loans. As Joe Biden can snap his fingers and say, okay, $10,000 to $20,000 in student loan debt is gone. Poof. However, the sad reality is that money just doesn't magically disappear. Someone has to pay for that money. And the people that have to pay for this plan are us, the taxpayers. As according to a Penn Warren budget model, based on these calculations, the plan would cost each taxpayer over $2,000. Then looking at the grand scheme of things, this new executive order will cost the American taxpayer $40 to $60 billion over the next decade to pay off. This is a ton of money on the taxpayer, and this is why people are claiming that the new Student Forgiveness Act is actually unfair, as there are people that work 2 jobs to pay off all their student loan debt. And in return, they get nothing. They lose. There are people that decided not to go to college so then they didn't have to have any of this debt. Now they are paying for someone else's debt. They get punished for not going to college. They get nothing. They lose. Good day, sir. It might be good for these students that have this massive amount of debt paid off, but it's not fair to the people that didn't go to college, or to the people that actually went to college, took out student loans, and then paid them all back. And the thing is that people that are getting these loans forgiven aren't that poor. As according to the same Pell Warren study, 69 to 73% of people getting their loans forgiven are in the top 60% of the income distribution. So we are giving money to people that are just starting to get their very first job. Of course their pay might be lower, because that's how jobs work. You start at the lowest point and then you work your way up. And in this economy where employers are looking for jobs, the average price for a college graduate is $50,000 a year. So if this is where students are starting out, there is nowhere to go but up, especially if you have a great job. This is why this executive order is so bad, because it will only benefit the wealthy, not the poor college students. Along with that, we must answer a very important question. Is what Joe Biden doing even legal? Well, according to Nancy Pelosi a year ago, no, the president can't do this. Here she is talking about how the president doesn't have the power to eliminate student loan debt.
Here's the thing. People think that the president of the United States, is this more on the subject and you ever want to know? Well, you'll let me know. People think that the president of the United States has the power for debt forgiveness. He does not. He can postpone, he can delay, but he does not have that power. That has to be an act of Congress.
So she is claiming that you have to go through Congress to get a bill like this done. But Joe Biden is doing it by executive order. So what changed their mind? Well, Joe Biden found a loophole in a 2003 law called the HEROES Act, which stands for Higher Education Relief Opportunities for Students Act. This was passed after 9/11 to assist first responders and other Americans impacted by the attack. There was also a memo from the Biden administration's legal counsel defending this decision that claimed the HEROES Act, first enacted in the wake of the September 11th attacks, provides the secretary broad authority to grant relief from student loans requirements during specific periods. A war, other military operations, or national emergency, such as the present COVID-19 pandemic, and for specific purposes, including to address the financial harms of such a war, other military operations, or emergencies. So let me get this straight. This means that technically Joe Biden is claiming that we are still in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. It is a flimsy argument, and I don't believe it holds any water at all, meaning that this law will be struck down by the Supreme Court, because just like Nancy Pelosi said, it needs to go through Congress. He can't just do this by a swipe of a pen. It is 100% unconstitutional. Now, I will say it made sense during the deep, dark days of the 2 weeks to slow the spread to stop students from paying their loans. The government was telling everyone that they needed to stay home, meaning that people weren't making money to pay off these different loans. So they were pausing it until the pandemic ended. The moratorium on student loans wasn't meant to forgive student loans at all. It was meant to give people time to go back to work, and then they can start paying off their loans again. We are seeing right now that COVID-19 is over. People are going back to work. They are finding new jobs, and they are getting money. It is hard for me to believe that students are still suffering from the COVID-19 pandemic when it happened 2 years ago. But instead of them paying for their own debt that they borrowed from the government wants you, the average American taxpayer, to pay for their student loans. And if this cycle continues to happen, the students of today that are getting loans forgiven will see their taxes increase because they have to pay for someone else's college. Then these people will truly understand how unfair this law is. Look, I get it. It stinks that colleges created a scheme where students are sort of coerced into getting loans, but it's not the government's job to pay them back. I'm a strong believer in cutting down or completely eliminating the interest rate that is on these different loans, as these interest rates makes it seem like you aren't paying anything, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger as years go by. Cutting the interest rate would help students get out of this debt faster, because it isn't continuing to grow every single year. You borrowed $10,000, then you give back $10,000. That's it, not a penny more. Along with this, the student loan forgiveness program will raise inflation, which is one of Joe Biden's favorite things to do, as I believe that the editorial board explains this bill and how it could hurt the American people very well. The paper writes, Mr. Biden's plan is also expensive and likely inflationary. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget estimates that extending the loan pause to the end of the year would cost $20 billion, while forgiving $10,000 for households making less than $300,000 would cost $203 billion. Together, these policies would nullify nearly a decade's worth of deficit reduction from the Inflation Reduction Act. So all of those prices that you see that are going up right now are just going to continue to rise, because Joe Biden doesn't know how to stop spending money. As that last paragraph mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act, which, if you are curious, does nothing to reduce inflation. Now, one of my favorite things that Democrats do is name laws. As if you disagree with the Inflation Reduction Act, then you love inflation, and you just want the American people to suffer, which is stupid because the bill doesn't even do what it was supposed to do, which was reduce inflation. You don't have to take my word for it. As Oxford Economics wrote, our preliminary analysis of the Inflation Reduction Act, a climate tax and health-focused bill, shows it will boost the level of GDP by another 0.2% to 0.3% by the end of 2031. And despite its name, will have no measurable impact on inflation. And it just gets worse for Joe Biden and the economy, as over 230 economists say that this bill will not reduce inflation. And according to Pell Warren, once again, the act would very slightly increase inflation until 2024 and decrease inflation thereafter. Along with that, they said, these point estimates are statistically indistinguishable from zero, thereby indicating low confidence that the legislation will have any impact on inflation. Okay, I can see that you're still skeptical because the bill says Inflation Reduction Act. Even the communist himself, Bernie Sanders, says that this bill will do nothing to reduce inflation. Here's a video of Bernie talking about it.
I want to take a moment to say a few words about the so-called Inflation Reduction Act that we are debating this evening. And I say so-called, by the way, because according to the CBO and other economic organizations who have studied this bill, it will in fact have a minimal impact on inflation.
So the bill doesn't do what it's supposed to do. It is $740 billion of government spending that we don't need right now because that raises inflation. It promotes a bunch of green energy crap. So much so that after this bill was passed, the Democrats changed the name of the bill to the Climate Change Bill. So they lied to us to get it passed, which I'm not shocked by because the government is always lying to us, especially Democrats. The question is, how will this bill be paid off? Well, it'll be paid off just like how we are going to pay off student loan debt, by raising our taxes. As no matter how many times the White House or Joe Biden says it, this bill will raise taxes not just on the 1% and the millionaires and billionaires, but you, the average American living in the middle class. How will they make sure that people are paying their fair share of taxes? Well, by putting $80 billion worth of new funding to the IRS, which was in the Inflation Reduction Act. There are so many fact checks that have come out that claim, no, this doesn't mean that the IRS agents are going to come after you and me. They are just going after the millionaires and billionaires, so you don't have to worry. No. The fact is they are raising taxes on everyone, and they need these new IRS agents to make sure that people pay their fair share. Because the government wants your money, and Joe Biden needs your money because he has to pay off all of these bills that are going to cost the taxpayer millions of dollars. Here are some videos of the IRS agents doing that.
Please, federal agent. Please. Put your hands up. Put your hands up. What are you doing? You're under arrest for you.
Where's that example? Sir, put your hands up and stop moving.
What are you looking for?
Do you have any weapons on, sir?
What are you looking for?
Look for action camera.
Where's that?
No, sir. Stay put.
As in the end, both of these bills are similar. They are trying to fix a problem that is hurting the American people, that are struggling through different situations. But they won't work. The Inflation Reduction Act will raise inflation, and the student loan debt forgiveness won't address the root problem that colleges are facing. So the cycle will just continue over and over and over again. The solution is not to throw money at the problem. The solution is to look deeper and see what the real cause of the problem is. According to Joe Biden and these Democrats, it's the opposite. Throwing money at a problem will just make it better. And that's not how economics works, and it will push our country to a inflationary spiral that may lead to stagflation, and one day our coffees are going to cost $15. This is why we have to take the checkbook away from Joe Biden, so then we can save some money before we run out of it. And with that, I just want to thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Dockery Docket. And until next time, like my mom always says, be good, be kind, be loving, goodbye.
So you get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.